All right. So we should be live now. How's everyone doing tonight? Got Peak Drew, Songo Anda, Leaf Green Goblin, All Man, Gump Brave, Jellyfish, Bryce Miller, Shug, Pokemon Kai. Hope everyone's having a good night. Thank you all for hanging. Um, Old Man Ketchum, how are you? Lucky K, nice to see you as well. So yeah, I'll just want to start tonight, and definitely we can just do like a normal Q&A, and people feel free to ask about. Doesn't have to necessarily be the name of the video. Feel free to ask any question. I'm gonna go for probably hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe tonight. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Might be a little less, a little more. You know me. Um, um, but I want to start with this. With talking specifically about alt arts and speculating a little bit on what is their popularity going to look like in 2 to 3 years, and then sort of 5 to 10 years. Um, for those who plan on maybe being in the hobby that long and and collecting that long and care or are interested in thinking about, yeah, where the popularity of them will be, where will the value of them be, uh, which is often related to popularity and relevance. Um, so I was at just on, I guess it was yesterday. I was at a I went to a show, a local show with Nick, Old School Pokemon. We spent the day together, sold some cards, hung out. It was a nice time. Um, and Nick bought and sold and all modern at the show. And his case, the only cards he really brought were alt arts. He had just bought a large collection of I think every single alt art from including the first alt arts from the Sun and Moon era. Um, and he So his case was filled with raw cards, all raw, no graded. And then he was selling Scarlet and Violet booster boxes, and I was selling some modern booster boxes, a bunch of Sun and Moon X and Y raws, and a bunch of vintage and middle era slabs. And so it was interesting to see kind of who, at this one local show, what people were interested in, what they were searching for, what they were wanting, etc. Um, and the stuff that sold the most were uh, the thing that sold the most were definitely the Scarlet and Violet sealed product, and part of that was people were buying it to probably resell it, and Nick was offering really good prices. Because one guy bought, or there was one guy I think who bought maybe a few cases and then a bunch of ETBs, and but there were also people buying single boxes who I talked to who were planning on opening and enjoying the set. Um, and then there were a number. I sold maybe 5 to 10, or did some trade sales on vintage slabs, and I sold maybe 20 to 30 X and Y Sun and Moon era raws, and I would guess that Nick probably sold 20 ish of the alt arts, maybe 25. Um, Now the alt arts in general were much more expensive than most of the Sun and Moon and X and Y cards that I was selling, the raws. Outside of, I sold a gold card, like the Reshiram gold card for 100. I sold a Rainbow Rare Charizard for, I think it was $250. I sold it from which were a couple of sort of the biggest chase cards and the biggest, the most expensive cards from the Sun and Moon and XY era. I think I sold a Flashfire full art Charizard, one of the more sort of expensive sought after ones from that era. Um, but nothing that has but there's nothing from the Sun and Moon and X and Y era in raw form that is holding the prices that the alt arts are today. Particularly the most popular alt arts. There are lots of alt arts that are only 15, 20, 30, $40 raw. But there are at least 5 to 10, I think, maybe certainly 4 or 5, I would say, that are, uh, you know, in the multiple hundreds. And if you just look at over 100, there's quite a few. Whereas there are very few cards from Sun and Moon and X and Y that are achieving those prices. So uh, when we look or discuss or explore the question of what are the alt arts going to do in the future, uh, obviously no one knows for sure, but a decent place to start, I think, is trying to outline some of the positives and negatives, and looking at what other cards in the past have done, and then trying to theorize a bit where we might be in the future and uh, what what may be popular in the future. Um, so uh, the pluses of the alt arts maintaining value or being more successful, more expensive long term than something like a Rainbow Rare GX Charizard, which was the most, expensive and sought after card from the Sun and Moon era, or some of the gold cards or silver cards, silver card, or some of the gold secret rares from the X and Y era. Uh, is one sort of very subjective thing that we'll have to just kind of see how it all plays out, which is just the first argument that most people say, which is just, well, the alt arts are just better. They're better looking, they're more interesting, the design is superior, it's more attractive, more beautiful, more creative. And I just really like them a lot better across the board, from the types of texture to the creativeness in the art, to having multiple Pokemon on them, to it being sort of like in a world. The Pokemon sort of existing in a world, in a sophisticated kind of, beautiful background. Unlike maybe some of these other cards, like a Rainbow Rare, which every Rare has the same color, the same basic colors. The pose of the Pokemon is different, but otherwise look very similar. Uh, and or the gold cards, very similar sort of thing. Similar to those Rainbow Rares. Um, and I think that it's very hard to predict what art people are going to like in the long run, but I'm certainly open to the idea that people will always like this art better, or always enjoy this style better than any card that is just sort of has that uniform background, something like that. So I think that is always a possibility. Okay. So now let's think about so alt arts. One thing I think is interesting to think about and look at is, when would the alt arts, what could replace the alt arts, or what could be the new popular thing that might take some of the demand or some of the heat? If it's not going to be this old stuff, let's say, you know, people today and for the foreseeable future are going to be like, you know what, like those gold cards, those Rainbow Rares, those, or like Hidden Fates, those full art shinies, they're just not as beautiful. They're not as interesting. as these alt arts. In many cases, the pull rates aren't as difficult. The rainbow rare ones from Sun and Moon were quite difficult, particularly something like the Charizard, because of how many rainbow rares were in that slot. To pull that card was similarly difficult, very, very difficult, around the same range. But something like the gold card, like a gold Reshiram, for example, that was quite a bit easier to pull than any specific alt art, because there was only, two gold cards that you could pull. Or something like from Dragon Majesty, the Ultra Necrozma gold card. There was only one gold card in that set, even though it was very hard to pull a gold card. If you pulled a gold card, you pulled that specific card, for example, right? So to pull any specific alt art, particularly from sets that had a lot of alt arts, very, very challenging and difficult. And so, okay, so because of the art and because of the difficulty to pull, these are going to be, more popular than any of these old things, right? So then it's like, well, what else could there be that might compete for it? Is Pokemon going to continue to make stuff that's very difficult to pull and that people really like the look of? Let's say, in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And when we look at past history, Pokemon has followed this pattern of, they start a bit slow in the new era. They tend not to release the rarest, most hard to pull cards initially, and they tend to add in some new types of chases as the era progresses. Now, is that guaranteed to happen? No, nothing in Pokemon is guaranteed to repeat itself. It's always possible that there will not be anything in this next Scarlet and Violet era that is as rare or difficult to pull as some of these alt arts. We don't know. I think if you were a betting man, you would say Pokemon will probably try to do that and try to create art that connects to people and listen to their fan base, because they want there to be chases. They want there to be decent secondary market value so that people continue to buy the product and they can print a lot of it. And there's still a lot of, hype, but nothing is for certain. And Pokemon could decide that it's better to actually pull it back a little bit and maybe keep the value and the excitement, around those alt arts by not having as rare or difficult to pull stuff, and maybe catering more to the players, catering more to kind of collectors who may not have as much money or may want to be able to afford the cards and not want $200, $300 cards, but would prefer all the cards to be $20 to $50. We really don't know exactly what Pokemon's going to do. But just like in the past, just like when we look at when we look back at Sword and Shield, we look back at Sword and Shield base had the gold cards, the gold Zamazenta and Zacian, and those cards started out really hot and really expensive. And then when people realized that there were lots of them, they were easy to pull, and people kind of moved on to the Charizards and Champion's Path, to the Vivid Voltage, Rainbow Rare Pikachu, they really tanked in value. Those started out at about 200, 250. I even saw some sell 300, 400 in PSA 10, and then they fell 8 months later. They were $40 each in PSA 10 to $60 each. $40, I bought a few in auction. That was sort of the very, very low, up to maybe $60, $70 if you were to buy it now. So what we're seeing right now, the price of something like Miriam, the prices of the Gyarados and the Miriam's quite a bit more expensive. I think the Gyarados and the Arcanine are already not going for hundreds of dollars. So we'll see where those all settle. And then when you look at a set like Darkness Ablaze, the Charizard, the non-Rainbow Rare Charizard, just the I don't know, it wasn't even a full art, right? Just the VMAX Charizard. People were speculating hard on that. That got up to about $200, $250 at one point, and then came right back down to, $50, $30, and it's sort of been at that price since. There were lots of them, and then they made a Rainbow Rare version of that exact same art. For those who don't remember this, there was some speculation on channels saying maybe they won't make a Rainbow Rare because they had a Rainbow Rare version of that VMAX art that was given out as like a Japanese trophy like card to competitors, and so maybe they won't do it in English. Eventually, they did do it in English, and that combined with people just sort of like moving on to other things, and the fact that it was very easy to pull, and there was quite a bit of Darkness Ablaze printed, made that card eventually not have much value, and to this day, not really be you don't hear anyone talking about that card. There really aren't too many people chasing that card. There's plenty of that card out there for anyone who wants it. Now the alt arts, however, the let's go to a couple more cards. So next card to talk about would be like the Vivid Voltage Pikachu. The Vivid Voltage Pikachu. Fat Belly says he doesn't remember Darkness Ablaze Zard being over 120. Yeah, it was about 200 to 250 PSA 10. I don't know what it was raw. I would imagine it was probably that price or even higher raw, like right out of the gate, and it was for a bit. Yeah, for real. And you could actually go back on my channel because I covered it and I talked about how I would only pay $50 for that card or $4 for that card max. And there were a bunch of people who were like, "You don't know what you're talking about," the usual rigmarole. You're an idiot. This is going to be amazing. This will be the key card in the era. It's funny to go back and watch these kind of like interactions. So I imagine that card probably raw if it was 250 PSA 10, 100 raw maybe at that time, 120 raw. I don't really know, but certainly quite expensive. Anyway, so let's look at the Vivid Voltage Pikachu. Another one came out. At that point, Rainbow Rares were still the hottest item. You had in the end of the Sun and Moon era, you had cards like that Latios, alt art that was very expensive. But outside of that, it was really, people were still kind of looking at that Rainbow Rare Charizard. Hidden Fates had been obviously a huge hit with the full art shinies, but there was so much supply. So this Vivid Voltage Pikachu, this Rainbow Rare Pikachu came onto the market, very popular, lots and lots of channels, everyone talking about this is the best card, chasing this card. I don't remember exactly how expensive that card got, but it was definitely close to 1,000, if not, in a PSA 10. 600 to 1,000 for sure. There might have been some that even sold a little bit over that, right at the beginning. As more and more of that product was opened, and as people kind of turned their attention to the alt arts being the new exciting thing, and negativity sort of around Rainbow Rares kind of ensued, that card has done nothing but really, really fall in value. I think it's stabilized a bit and maybe has come up a little bit again, but is very, very low compared to where it is. So what's going to happen with these alt arts? What's going to happen with these alt arts is the question. So the positives we talked about, at least right now, people love the art. People are excited about the art. It's something different. It's something exciting. It feels like a really move forward in Pokemon in a lot of ways to have this type of background with this type of multiple Pokemon on it and sort of this world on a full art card. Okay. And then mixed with the rarity, the difficult to pull. It's exciting. It's different. And there's tons of collectors out there right now who are wanting to put together a binder full of alt arts, and buy every alt art. And as I started this live talking about, Nick and I, Old School Pokemon, we're selling cards yesterday at a local show. And there were at least 3 or 4 people who came by saying, they were either close to finishing a binder with every alt art or trying to accomplish that sort of goal. Still a lot of excitement around doing that. So I think the first real test for how are these alt arts going to do in the long run, and will they be able to maintain popularity, is going to come once, if there is a same rarity tier released in this Scarlet and Violet era. And it's quite possible that there won't be anything like that released for another 7-8 months. If history repeats itself, that we get these easier to pull cards like we did in Sun and Moon for the first, 3, 4, 5 sets, 3 sets, or what it would have been like roughly 3. There's some specialty sets depending on if you include specialty sets or not in that. And then Pokemon is going to release something different, a new type of tier that's going to be similarly as rare, maybe even more rare. And then it's going to be, well, how are people going to react to that? Are people still going to be as interested in the alt arts? Or are there still going to be people chasing the alt arts who weren't able to buy them? How many people right now are waiting and hoping the prices will come down on alt arts before buying them, creating a sort of floor of sorts that may not be very low, as compared to something like, as we talked about, the Vivid Voltage Pikachu, how far that fell in a percentage basis. We're talking about cards that fell 60% in value, 70% in value. Are we going to see that type of fall on something like the alt art? Now, if you look back at the Rainbow Rare GX Charizard, which let's say was the alt art of that era, very difficult card to pull, very popular. People who were not around back then will be like, how can you compare Rainbow Rare to an alt art? Well, the feeling and the conversations going on when that Rainbow Rare was released was, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's a card this rare and it's a Charizard, and oh my gosh, and the price point that it was able to kind of get right out of the gate was huge, particularly for that time. We're talking many hundreds of dollars. That card has held up quite well in value, but outside the tens, which are quite valuable, we're talking $2,000, and has quite a difficult 10, or fairly difficult 10 rate, certainly quite a bit more difficult than probably all of the alt arts, or the vast majority of the alt arts will end up happening. But that card, if you look at sort of the raw price being $250 to $500-ish, that's the exact same as it was years ago when it was popular. So I guess the good news is that it hasn't tanked in value. The not so good news, if you're an investor out there, is investing in what was the big thing then, it really hasn't increased in value. And unfortunately, if you want to be sort of kind of honest about it, that's pretty stunning, considering that card came out pre-boom, and now we're sort of post-boom, where certainly every vintage card is way more expensive than it was at that time. If you had invested or speculated on that Rainbow Rare Charizard, you would have made basically no money, on the raw. Now, PSA 10, now depending on exactly when you bought it, and you bought the PSA 10 for a graded card, you certainly might have, but overall on sort of the raw. Now, will that happen with alt arts? Will in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, will there be new things that people are more interested in? Will there be just as difficult to pull, even more difficult to pull, maybe, items and cards that people move on to? How will and will there be a boom? Because without that boom, where would that Charizard be now? If the hobby was the same size as it was then, and these alt arts were going on now, I would have a pretty hard time believing that Charizard would be as expensive as it even is now. Now, we can argue and we can say, well, the Rainbow Rares are just better. They're just better, and Pokemon is not going to make anything rare, and is not going to be able to make anything cooler or anything that excites people more. And that is possible. It is possible, particularly the stuff that just hits more. Is it possible that something just sticks with people for year after year after year, and 3, 5, 10 years down the line, we are like, this is it? I just will tell everyone that was the exact same argument that people were making on Hidden Fates, that people were making on Evolutions, that people were making on, on the raw stuff. And we're really talking about raw here, on the graded stuff. And it didn't happen for those things, but it might for this. But just understanding that if you are speculating on these things or investing in these things, that there is risk there. and to think that through critically for yourself, whether that risk is worth it for you or not. Now, one thing that happened at this thing yesterday, at this card show that Nick old school and I were selling at, was that there were some people who came up who were buying them, or who own them, who were saying things to me like they're definitely going to be more expensive in the future. You know, they don't know. These people don't know who I am. They don't know I'm a YouTuber. They don't know I'm engaged in any of these discussions. They were just kind of telling me like, these are sure bets. These are going to be thousands of dollars in the future. You know, these types of things, super confident. Of course, they owned them, and so they were hoping that they would go up in value. I think a lot of people who talk that way about these are a bit newer to the hobby, sort of less experienced, have a lot of money in these cards, and are sort of hopeful that their investments will turn out well and will continue to go up. And they sort of guarantee it, you know, this sort of extreme bullishness about them. And so when I talked, you know, in my last live about something being in a bubble or something being highly speculative, when a lot of people are buying something or owning something with that sort of attitude, that is concerning. Now, there are a lot of other people, you know, there are probably tons and tons of people out there who are buying them because they think they're really cool, they can afford them. And there are probably a lot of people out there who are waiting for prices to come down, as I said before, who still want to buy them and still want to own them, which will stop them from really seriously collapsing, you know, potentially. So those are sort of the positives and negatives. I hope that you can have a more realistic understanding and approach to these than, unfortunately, the guy or the couple of people who came to me with the sort of energy of like, I own this and I'm going to my alt art collection will be worth $100,000 or $200,000 in a few years. Like, you know, this sort of extreme, right, belief that, like, believe it or not, like a lot of people are saying, whether they believe it or not, I'm not sure. Some of these people are just trying to get other people to buy them and are trying to hype up their own thing. For sure, there's always going to be a lot of that in this space. People who just are willing to sort of, you know, say what they need to say to get the value of their items to go up, that type of thing. But anyway, so hopefully that you know, is sort of a helpful for those who maybe didn't know some of the history of some of the price points of sort of other very popular cards in the history. And I really think that, barring a big reprint of some of these sets in the Sword and Shield era, it is not crazy to make a statement, in my opinion, that the popularity of alt arts and the prices of alt arts should do pretty well, at least barring some sort of economic big shift in Pokemon popularity, should do well at probably at least until there's that next big chase item, I would think. But again, it really depends on also how much Pokemon prints. You know, one thing that I went over in my office hours in Patreon in Discord this week was trying to do a rough breakdown of the market cap of sort of like modern sealed, which is obviously where these cards are coming out of or coming from. We talked about how, okay, well, Pokemon Company made $1.6 billion last year, and you know, roughly a fourth or so of that is TCG right now, something like that. So that means we're talking, you know, Pokemon Company is making $400 million off of the modern Pokemon that they're selling each year, if every year they're printing the same amount as that year. Now, the breakdown of Japanese versus English, of ETBs versus booster boxes, these things are all a mystery to anyone who does not work directly for these companies. But when you think about the amount of money that is, some people are going to be like, that's a lot of money. Some people are going to be like, that's nothing, you know. But you know, when we start to flesh it out a little bit, okay, so we, you know, 400-ish million, a little over 400 million, but let's say around 400 million. Well, that's Pokemon. So if Pokemon is selling the product at, you know, a booster box or something, let's say theoretically at about 50% or so, maybe a little higher than 50% versus what it's eventually selling, what eventually that LGS is selling it for. In many cases, they're actually probably quite a bit under 50% if that LGS is selling it for 120 to 150 for sure. But if Pokemon is selling it from 40 to 60, and then the middleman distributor is selling it from 60 to 90 to the LGS, and then the LGS is selling it, and then some of these boxes are going up to $400 like Evolving Skies, and other ones are $150 or $120. Like that 400 million market cap suddenly becomes 800 million, 1.2 billion, 1.6 billion, depending on the multiple, very easily. And when you start talking about that much money, you can compare it again. It's just for reference. If you take all of the vintage slabs right now graded from Wizards of the Coast, and even some of the more popular sets, this was probably about 5-6 months ago that I did this. So I'm sure the market cap is bigger now because more have been graded. But I did, in my Patreon, I went through sort of the market cap. I actually added up every slab, and it equaled something around 200 million was the value of all of them combined. This is just English. This is just the English side, and just set cards from talking base first edition, Shadowless, Unlimited, Jungle Fossil, Rocket, the Gyms, Neos, E-Series, and then some key sets in sort of the middle era. Talking 200 million, right, total of all of the value of these vintage slabs. And again, this is just the slabs. This isn't the raw cards, there's so much more. There's so many raw cards that aren't graded. So, but just to give some reference point when we talk about, whoa, these are really expensive items, or there's so much market cap on this, that if we're thinking Pokemon, once it actually gets to the market or the secondary market, there's $1 billion or $1.6 billion every year of new market cap on the market. It becomes hard to be like, well, how is that going to be sustainable? Is there really that much interest and that much money that's going to constantly flow into every new sealed product, once the sealed product's open, into all of the chase cards, to really kind of make them investable? And my argument is like, that seems like I feel very strongly that will not happen. Now, how long could it go? Another year, 2 years, 3 years? If Pokemon, sure, potentially, it seems more reasonable, right, than 5 to 10 years of that type of growth of every new set of, every new item. Could it be that Pokemon dramatically decreases the print run, going forward, and they're not making as much money, but then the new money doesn't need to flow into the hobby as much, and so it's able to keep a better equilibrium of all these things? That's possible. But but when you compare sort of the amount, it's a lot of money that needs to keep flowing to, when Rudy made his video saying that all of the Sword and Shield boxes are going to be $300 in 3 years. That could be, but if all of those boxes, and then all of the next boxes, and then all of the next boxes, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars that it will take in market cap. Now, the other thing to say is that market cap doesn't actually is not the end all be all. And the reason is because if an item is very thinly traded and mostly collected and held, the amount, like you might have a market cap of $1 billion, but you only need $1 million. Only $1 million of that item is really being sold or traded every few months. Let's say theoretically, you really don't need that much money then flowing in that market to keep the prices high. And so just because something has a staggeringly high market cap, if it's very thinly bought and sold, then it's a lot more possible for those items to hold in value. But the larger percentage that's constantly being moved and sold, and the more that's constantly coming into the system that needs to be initially sold, the more difficult, the more that market cap number becomes important and sort of like insurmountable. I really hope that that's helpful for people, and giving a little bit of that math and those numbers is helpful as they sort of think about where we're at right now and where we might be in the future. So happy to take questions now, and hang out with you guys. Um, yeah, and I guess another thing to mention is Dengar puts like Sword and Shield era will hold such a special place in so many people. Like one argument that people could make is that yes, Jake, it's not sustainable. This type of growth and movement on the next chase cards isn't sustainable. On the next booster box isn't sustainable, but it will be sustainable on the Sword and Shield era. That mathematically is much more possible. It just feels a bit like wishful thinking, and I don't I don't know what odds I would put on something like that happening, but um I would bet that Pokemon's going to come out with cool stuff in the future that we're going to want to collect and enjoy. And it's very difficult, when people say like there's going to be a lot of nostalgia for this, that is something that's usually best left to 10 years, 15 years to see if there's actual nostalgia. When you're trying to predict what people are going to be nostalgic in the future for, I'm not sure like how good people are at that. Maybe they are good at that. Certainly it's possible. It's absolutely possible. And again, the alt arts could be some of the most popular collected. We could be looking back many years into the future. Listen, Pokemon could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years of amazing success and market growth, and prices today may be, pennies on what they may be in the future. All this sort of bullishness, like it's all possible. And the Sword and Shield era could be a really special era that people are really fond of and go back to. I would never claim that is impossible. I just wouldn't invest in that and put and put money on that, particularly if I'm buying in at prices that's sort of like assuming that as definite. Or as I said before, I'm talking to people at this this card show, and they're telling me it's guaranteed, and that's why I'm holding it. That's why I'm keeping it, because it's guaranteed. That sort of vibe. All right. Yeah, so this is the other side of that argument. In my opinion, theory is only 95 sets would be worth next to nothing. Only the original sets would be sought after. I think that is also possible. And if people get their feelings hurt by that, like, I think you are being irrational. Just like if people get their feelings hurt, if anyone says like that this era couldn't sustain itself or be really popular, down the line, like I think I think you can be irrational on either side. I will say that again, and I made this argument a lot in that conversation and debate of sorts with Alex, there is no other hobby with an example of where like the original first appearance, first stuff somehow became irrelevant, and a middle, somewhere in the middle, 30 years in stuff that was, printed quite a bit, and didn't have a ton of negative attrition on it, over time, because most of it's kept in great condition and graded. There just is no example or even close to it where that happened. So if you're betting on that, it would sort of be like Pokemon would be the anomaly, because these cards are just so amazing and so beautiful, and because people just love this era so much more than other eras. I just wouldn't bet on that. I think there's a pretty good chance that we're kind of laughing about this stuff in a year or two, just like there's tons of people who, a lot of these people left, but there's a lot of people sort of in my community who now we can laugh. I mean, at the time people were screaming at me, when we were in the bubble on Vintage and the bubble on Sun and Moon and Hidden Fates and Evolutions, and people were screaming at me for my opinions then. People, are still screaming at me for my opinions now. And I get it. It's a combination of a lot of people own this stuff. And so they don't, this is definitely not everyone, but there's, particularly people in like the comment sections and the chats, people have a lot of money invested in this stuff, and they don't want a guy like me coming out here saying that maybe that's not so smart. It doesn't feel good to hear that. I get that. So, we'll see how that all goes, but I do think there's a pretty decent chance, in a year or two from now, we're sort of looking back and Pokemon, there's some new chase cards and some new heat, and we're kind of looking back and we're like, wow, like the conversation's really shifted, and we're talking about different cards and different items now. I mean, even with Scarlet and Violet, there are a lot of people talking about that Miriam, and and certainly the Japanese Miriam going up, humongously in price, and a lot of people talking about the Gyarados and the Arcanine, and of course, partially because they're just very easy to pull relative to the Alt Arts. We just don't have an item yet from this era that's difficult to pull. We just really don't know. We don't have something to kind of see how it stands up to. And then, of course, the sort of really the thing that could really change things is if Pokemon ever goes to a really rare item, like a case hit rarity, or a multi-case hit. It's every 12 boxes would be, or every 100 boxes, or serialized cards every 100 box or something. Again, there's no sign that Pokemon's doing that tomorrow. I don't think anyone has to panic. I think it's the most likely scenarios that they do what they did before, which is they wait for 8 months or so, 7 to 8 months before they release, just like they did with Sun and Moon, before they release their kind of best rarity tier, most exciting, item of that era, style of that era. But we'll have to see how all that goes. But I hope people are having fun. I know that the last talk got heated, and I certainly was frustrated, and I think that some people don't like to hear me frustrated, or hear people frustrated, or hear people emotional, or talking negatively. I certainly stand behind everything I said in that live, and my emotions, and everything that I did in that live. But I also hear from people that it's not what everyone wants, and what makes everyone feel good and feel happy, and it is important for the hobby and for everyone here to really enjoy their times, and to collect what they love and what they enjoy, and to not have anyone make them feel bad for what they enjoy or what they like. And I think that there's a fine line though between that. It's like, well, I really enjoy collecting these things, I really like these things, to coming out on YouTube or comment sections or other places and telling people this is going to make you a lot of money, this is highly investable, this is going to be the greatest card, making these types of prediction, that I get angry or frustrated, because I think unfortunately it has a negative impact on people's experiences here, because people listen to that, they don't make well thought out decisions, and then they leave the hobby. And a lot of people get burned down and leave the hobby because they run into a lot of that, instead of maybe some better, more kind of well-rounded messages and ideas. So we shall see. Okay, if people have questions about this conversation, I know there's like tons of comments in the chat. I really appreciate everyone hanging out and commenting, as always. Happy to take questions on this topic or any topic, whatever's on people's minds. Niche questions, broad questions. I'm down to go for another probably 45 minutes to an hour. We'll see how long my energy goes. If you guys want to ask me anything. For now, I'll take a look at the chat and see what's going on. So, alt arts, especially the VMAX alts, are way rarer than gold stars. So one thing I think is important to talk about when we talk about rarity is fundamentally there are two different conversations. One is like the pull rate. The other one is actual rarity or number in existence. And so just because something has a more difficult pull rate, like the alt arts, it doesn't mean that they're rarer than the gold stars, because likely there was so much less of that stuff printed than the alt arts. Again, I bet Gump Brave knows that, and he's just saying that he's just making it clear that like the VMAX alts, just for people to know, are way more difficult to pull each individual one of those than any gold card, which is true. But again, it depends on the set, right? And the amount of gold stars, the amount of VMAXs that, can shift. Obviously gold stars there, being three of them, um, to pull each individual one. But when we really talk rarity, it is important to understand that concept, right? That there's a big distinction there. Like, and then there's absolute rarity, which is the amount of a card that exists in the world. And then there's condition rarity, which is the amount of a card that exists in a certain condition. And so when we talk about alt arts, the pull rate, is very low, right? Comparable to some of those rainbow rares from Sun and Moon, where there were like, not to pull to pull a rainbow rare was easier than to pull a VMAX alt. But because there were 13 rainbow rares in the set, to pull the Charizard rainbow rare, wasn't too far off. It was still easier, but not too far off. Kind of similar. So let's see what people are saying. People making some interesting comments here. I guess I'll just pick some comments out before people have questions. Here's a question. Gumbrave, do you think the top 10 to 20 rainbow rares compared to the top 10 to 20 alt arts? So I'm not sure, like, if you ask my personal opinion about what I would like to collect, trying to put aside the noise in the market, and let's say all of these cards have equal value and equal price, I would collect both. Which one would I prefer to live without? I definitely like the alt arts better. I like looking at the alt arts better most of the time. But the rainbow rare cards do have a special place because they were some of the first cards that I was engaging with when I came back in the hobby. That's how many people feel about the alt arts. I plan on collecting full sets of both. Like, I will definitely have full sets of both of these. There's no chance that I will not at some point in the future, unless I just like wake up one day and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just done with Pokemon. As long as I'm still engaged and enjoying it like I am now, I will definitely have full sets of both of these things. It's a very, subjective thing. Obviously, the vast majority of people right now would say, without hesitation, alt arts. That is very clearly the sentiment, and sort of the prices are dictating that, at least right now. But I will tell you, like in the 90s, like in comic books, for example, like there was a period where people were all about alt comic book arts and kind of different sort of foilings and kind of very bright and kind of intense colors and art. And then later on, there was sort of a pushback, and people didn't like that anymore. And there was sort of a negativity towards a lot of that stuff. And people wanted more simplistic art and, these types of things, so it's, if you ask me, do I think the alt arts or like WotC holos, like E-series holos, and which one do I like better stylistically? I like both. I definitely won't be bullied or pushed into by anyone, and I really push people to don't be bullied by people's strong opinions. People have like really strong opinions. Just be like, well, obviously this is better. It's like, all right, dude, relax. Like, it's okay. Like, if I'm trying to put my sort of nostalgia aside, which is impossible, obviously, I think those cards are beautiful. Like, I think E-series, I think the simplicity of the arts and the introduction of those characters, like I really respond to those arts. When I collect like Marvel, like, I have some like Marvel, here's some like Marvel PMGs on my table. You have like your old art, style versus something, totally different character, but like a new art style. And I like both. And I think my opinions may change over time. And there are times when I both things keep the other thing fun and interesting. I think alt arts are beautiful, and I love looking at them, and I really enjoy them. Like, and and I really enjoyed the look of these old arts too. And I'm a fan of this hobby. I'm a fan of the Pokemon. I'm a fan of all of the different art styles that they bring us. I think the Pokemon company's done an amazing job. Um, you know, and I guess I often feel like when someone is like, these are better, and I'm not saying you're saying this, Gump Brave, but I feel like there's an agenda of like, someone owns them and they're trying to convince other people rather than stating like the facts. Like I do it passionately sometimes, but like stating the facts of like what has happened in other hobbies to try to expand people's minds a little bit. There are people who come on and say, this is what you should like. This is better. This art's better, and it's strange. It's a little strange to me, to say I like this better or I'm enjoying this more now. Maybe in the future I'll enjoy that more. That to me is a very reasonable, honest man. This hobby is gonna be long. Like a lot of us are gonna be here a long time, and your tastes are gonna change. And it wasn't too long ago that Hidden Fates, Evolutions, Rainbow Rares, amazing rares, until people realized they weren't oh my God, these are the best arts ever. I heard some people saying, and then they realized there were so many of them and the price point took a hit and now they're garbage. It's you just have to keep all that in mind, all those dynamics. If you're really being honest, sort of an honest actor in the community, So I think too, Dangar, just so we're clear with terms, scarcity. So gold stars are very likely more rare in a true definition, of how many there are in the world. Scarce, they also are probably likely quite a bit more, maybe more scarce. Scarce is a weird sort of term to kind of understand. It really has to do with the amount that exists of an item versus the amount of people that want that item. So, my autograph is pretty scarce. Or sorry, it's not scarce. Sorry. My autograph is pretty rare. Excuse me. My autograph is pretty rare because I've only signed some people here, but it's not scarce because nobody wants it, right? Or only the people here, a few people wanted it, right? As a joke or whatever, right? Because they're fans of the channel and it's like a fun thing to do, at a convention. So something can be pretty rare that relative to another thing, like there can only be 5, 10, 15 of something versus hundreds of thousands. The alt arts, there's probably hundreds of thousands of them, but the alt arts could be more scarce because so many people want them and so many people are holding them that they don't come on the market that much, or when they do, they're at a very expensive price, et cetera. Trying to understand, dig into those terms and understand those concepts. Now, the semantics of these ideas matter less than understanding the different concepts. I know people got hung up in the last live on what's a bubble, and it's understanding the concepts and the nuances and the differences in these ideas that's important, not so much, this has to mean this and this has to mean this, and sort of getting into the semantic weeds. Hey, Basic. It's been a while, man. Have you been doing lives, Basic? I've been off YouTube for like a while. I haven't been watching YouTube videos, so I don't know what people have been doing these days, but I sort of miss hearing from you. Pokenomics, why the shift in Japanese over English in the last year or so when Japanese has been here for 27 years was never the case before? Yeah, I mean, like, certainly we can speculate and guess, well, China, there are these new big Chinese buyers. It makes sense given their proximity to Japan, and the fact that the Japanese cards are the original, that if they're fans of this, they would maybe prefer the Japanese cards to the English and would respond to that more, I suppose. That's super uneducated, feels like fairly common sense statement, but I don't really know that for a fact. I'm not talking to a lot of these buyers. Trying to get some more information from some people who are a little more, certainly in the Japanese market than I am, but I don't have anything really to report yet that feels, super important. Certainly would share something if I heard it. So, there's sort of that going on. English prices getting expensive, the Japanese quality, it's the usual things that people say. Once the Japanese started going up in price, it just like everything else, like once things become expensive, now people like them more, and now they're investable. Now they're great. It's the trend whores, let's say, the people who they only think something is good if it's expensive. They only think it's investable or speculative if it's expensive, sort of the exact opposite of the approach I would take as a collector or investor in anything. Um, uh, you know, some combination of those things. you know, uh, it becoming more popular in China, more popular in Japan. Maybe they're printing less. Who really knows? But it's super interesting to watch, and it should just go to show. It should just when these things happen, it gives another example of the stuff we talk about on this channel. How kind of difficult it can be to predict demand and these swings in demand. And if you buy in once there's a lot of demand and a lot of heat, that's often the exact wrong time to do it. It's much smarter to buy things that you think are really cool and really undervalued. And then eventually maybe other people will see that. XP says, I think there will be sleeper alt arts that will go up in price. Something that is $10 to $15 now with great art while everyone is looking at the main chase alts. Yeah, I mean, part of why I speculate that there's a bit of mania and a bubble going on in a lot of this stuff is I don't, in some parts is because I don't really understand the prices of a lot of these alt arts. I don't understand why one alt art is selling for $30 and one is $500. I get that some of it has to do with like pull rates and differences in rarity for sure, but it also just feels strange to me as someone who has been in this hobby a long time, who is sort of like, well, I'm not sure this art is any better than this art, and this Pokemon is just as popular as that Pokemon, and in some cases more historically popular, and more expensive. So it's interesting. I'm Matthew Money says, to some extent, alt arts are the most someone can do with a card as a medium. Maybe different foil over a card will be popular in a few years and now, but I'd rather look at alt arts than rainbow foils. So I think it's interesting to try to theorize. It's like, well, what could they do that would be even crazier, even more amazing, right? And I don't know. Certainly what I talked about before of just having something being rarer or serialized would be massive. But when we're just talking about art style, I don't know the answer to that. I do think that there will be, if they keep doing this type of stuff, there will be a yearning for things like rainbow rares and things that are like a simpler style that are more uniform, because over time it will be like just too much and unruly. And I've just seen that in other hobby so many times. Like if you study what was popular when, and then over a certain amount of time, it's like, it's just so interesting to see, like whenever they get too much of a good thing or a ton of something they really like, they start craving something different. They get bored. Do I think we're close to that point right now? I mean, we're certainly not. Right now, these things are massively popular and people love them. I love them. There's still a lot of, a passion for these and enjoyment for these that is not just speculator and investor based. It's based on people looking at them and having a reaction and enjoying them. Certainly some of it is, some decent, significant percentage of it is speculative and about the money, just like these guys at the card show saying, oh my God, these are going to go up forever. And that's why I'm holding, and the more it becomes that money talk and moves away from like, this is a cool card I like, the more risky that gets. Shiny gold, different metals. There's all different types of designs. I mean, that I imagine they could do. I'm not a designer, but yeah, that people would be like, whoa, that's really cool. That's exciting and something different. I don't know. You could be right. For all I know, you absolutely could be right. It's like this is as good as it gets. It's all downhill in art from here. I mean, certainly possible. So this point by Gumprave, I think is a really good one that I haven't said, which is Rainbow Rares seem really top heavy, and I think alt arts have a lot more parity, partially a function of the art style. Rainbow Rare doesn't add value. I think that the point that I really agree with is sort of like implied in the statement is that because the art is so diverse and different across the different alt arts are going to hit differently. So it's not just the Pokemon that decides the value of the card, but it's also the quality, which is so subjective and difficult, of the art or how people respond to the art. Whereas with the Rainbow Rares, they're all the same. And I wouldn't say the Rainbow Rare doesn't add value. I mean, the Rainbow Rare part of it added a huge amount of value in the past. And the fact that everything is similar can actually add a lot of collectability. It's fun to chase things that have a lot of similarity often, to build an entire set of similar things. And that's just a historical thing across hobbies. But I totally agree with the idea that the Pokemon is not the only thing going on here, right? Whereas in the Rainbow Rares, it's really they are in poses, and some of the poses are going to be cooler than other poses, even on the Rainbow Rares. But there's a lot more differentiation, with the alt arts and Rainbow Rares. I think that's a really smart point, Gumprave. And who is that egotistical that they have to have the one of one? Is it for the attention? Do they plan to sell it for a higher price? To me, rarity/scarcity doesn't equate to value. So it feels a little harsh. I certainly understand, to some degree where that comes from. Have to have the one of one. It feels a little bit of a strong language. I think it's okay to just like want something, think it's cool to like own something rare. You don't have to have it. It's just a piece of cardboard at the end of the day. There's also just rarity, right? Like if there's only one of an item versus 100,000 of an item, a lot more people who want it for, the 100,000 items for that to have the value, or because everything's supply and demand, right? So there's a lot more supply, which means you need a lot more demand for it to, theoretically to attain a certain price point. Do they plan to sell it for a higher price? To me, rare cases, some people I'm sure buy one of ones because they think it's a good investment, because they really they don't really care that much about it, but they want to make more money on it. Other people, they think it's cool, it's exciting to own a piece of something that's truly rare, that's truly difficult to find. I would, if it's not your thing, just don't buy, great. Then you don't, then you can buy less expensive stuff, right? Don't chase it. I think to me, it's very obvious why someone as a collector would want something that's extraordinarily rare, but I don't think it's necessarily for everyone. And I think that there are plenty of ways to collect. You don't have to collect because of the chase or the difficulty to find something. You can just simply collect. You can collect super common things that you just think are cool, right? But like, why are the alt arts worth so much more than like some of the character rares? It's because of this reason, I would argue. It's because people know that the alt arts are the hardest ones to pull, that there's a lot less of them. So there's a lot less supply on the market, that you don't need nearly as much demand in order for them to be very expensive. Yes, it's textured. In some cases it might have cooler art, but some of my favorite arts are actually those characters, some of those character rares, some of the dollar cards, $2 cards in some cases. That I think if put some foiling, put some maybe texture on that and make it rare, it's going to be hundreds of dollars versus $1, right? I definitely would be that way. So the fact that there are harder pull rates in Pokemon is fundamentally the same thing as a 1-to-1 when we talk about like the chase. Now, people who hate on serialized and hate on, like, oh, it's going to ruin, everything. It's funny that they're some of the same people who are chasing some of the hardest to pull cards and love the chase and enjoy the chase. But for some reason, once you make it serialized, once you make it super rare and like there are almost none of them, now it's uninteresting. This is not you, Chill Pill. Don't take this personally, but now it's not interesting and it's egotistical. People are full of hypocrisy at times, and but that's that. Yeah, that's normal. My view is that people did enjoy the Rainbow Rest, but only really went nuts for them for a few select cards. Alt arts would see that with. So it's unclear though, Gump I would argue that is that because they were Rainbow Rares, or is that because the market was so much smaller that there was just so much less money? Because when you actually look at price points, like people are only going nuts or spending really the Umbreon and maybe the Giratina are sort of like, and then maybe like the Request, like there are only a few that are sort of in a class of their own, and then the rest are, more in that $20 to $150 sort of price point. Are all of these higher price points a factor of the alt arts, or are they just a factor of there's just a lot more demand in general, and so all of these cards can be more expensive? I don't really know, but I think just to push back and play that some of it might be that, but also some of it might be just back at that time, because like all the Rainbow Rares like had some value. I mean, we're talking, it was like for a card to get to $20 to $30 out of a pack, like was a big accomplishment back in that day. That was a very, very expensive card. $20, $30 was really a pricey thing. Gumbrave says, for the record, I just enjoyed the District Nova left here. I really, back at you, man. I appreciate it. And I hope, me picking, some of your comments, they're good comments. That's why I picked them. And, I want to respond. It adds a lot when you comment those things, and, we're sort of able to go back and forth, I think, for the viewers, which is ultimately, a positive. For anyone out there, when I pick your comments and I sort of like debate, I hope people don't get hurt, or, I think most channels are not as argumentative with their audience and is more like, thank you so much, I love every view. I'm a little bit more like, let's debate, let's get into the topics, and I hope that's I hope people know that I really, really appreciate them making comments and coming and hanging out, even if they have different opinions. As long as they're not intentionally antagonizing me, or in my opinion saying things that are just so aggressively harmful to people. Like, I guarantee this is going to happen, this is the greatest thing, I can't control that. There are always going to be those people. I did have to block some people for one of the, I've blocked maybe 15 people my entire, almost going to be 3 years soon on YouTube. But I, recently have had to block a few more people just because I think that their comments are harmful, and their ideas are kind of harmful to the sort of healthy sort of reasonable discussion or debate. And that's just a decision I've made for my channel. Jay, can you force Darkness Ablaze sealed product? When was that? Were we joking in the chat one time? Yeah, people know who know that, like, for me, Darkness Ablaze was like the worst set. Like, I hated, like, that set just sucked. Opening that set was so lame. I really didn't like that set. So Mr. Wallace is joking. Ian Toomey, in a more digital internet age, what does an IP need to compete or overtake Pokemon? I had an absolute blast for the first few years in Hearthstone, but no physical cards to collect. What does an IP need to compete or overtake? Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I definitely can't give you a concise smart answer on something like that, but fundamentally, something that I mean, let's start with the actual product, something that speaks to people, something that's clever, something that has chase and excitement and fun, and brings fun and enjoyment into people's lives, right? cool characters, cool story, a lot of intricacy there, right? To, first and foremost. Then it's about, creating tons of different product lines that hit a lot of different peoples that are sort of funnels, getting a lot of money from investors, backers, and then being able to kind of, first of all, create a lot of products and then advertise those products in an effective way, pay influencers, partner with influencers. That's sort of look at something like MetaZoo attempting to, and the moves they made and the things that they had in order to get as far as they have gotten. Obviously to overtake Pokemon, is MetaZoo's maybe potential goal sometime in the future. And I think, price point and popularity and notoriety, we know that hasn't happened up until this point, but for something to just be successful and continue to make sets and continue to kind of survive as MetaZoo is, currently, is a success, in and of itself, and seeing kind of the things that they needed to do in order to make that happen. Obviously the better and more intricate the story is, the more it hits with people, the more lines that you're able to make, the better the game. If it's a TCG, all these things are going to help and be part of that success. Colemania says, I'm with you. I love alt arts and the simplicity of vintage. It's nice to hear a fellow person who appreciates all of it. Let's see. Upper Deck has insane card technology. I wish had more of Upper Deck's tech. I like Topps, though. They've made some great some Marvel cards are out of this world, but definitely outside of TCG scope. Yeah, I think like the creativeness certainly of Upper Deck, and some of it I like, some of it I don't like. I'm not sure. They have like fake diamonds in their cards on, some of the diamond sets, but the art style and the different things that they're doing, signatures, sketch cards, like there are places, there are plenty of places and things happening. It's a great point, Swami. Like, and you can look to what these other companies are doing that Pokemon could potentially, bring some of that in. As far as the tech, I don't know. I really don't know much about it. It's interesting. That'd be cool to bring someone on eventually to talk more specifically about how cards are made, the different techniques that they're doing. I actually have some people that I know who would have a lot of interesting things to say on that. I know we usually do more of the economic stuff on this channel, but it would be maybe cool to do that. I'm glad you brought those points up, Swam. Gumrip said, I heard a lot of folks talk about disliking rainbows and been glad they were gone. I have nothing against them. Not sure we'd see that from a no alt art set. I mean, certainly not now, right? But and alt art, I mean, we'll see. Rainbow rares are what now, almost 5 years old or something. 4 to 5 years old. That's a lot of years old. In 4 to 5 years, what will the conversation, or 3 to 4 years or whatever, what will the conversations be? I also think so much of like that, I hate this stuff, or I don't like this stuff. Like, it's like, I think it's a lot of it is overblown. A lot of it is people talking up or talking down stuff that they own or don't own. And I think a lot of it is, some of that stuff too was also bad. I liked it in the past, but now I don't like it because they've overdone it. I think that there was sort of that sentiment too, which I think is a very human sentiment, and something that I've, repeated in this lab a few times, the sort of, and you see that pattern in sort of in other hobbies and in this hobby, where it's like, something's cool and then it's just like there's just too much of it and then they do it and they kind of do it and do it and do it and then something else comes along and people are want something fresh, something different. Yeah, and Hidden Fates, is a great example. You can go back and watch like a lot of YouTubers and a lot of conversations about Hidden Fates. People saying greatest set ever, it'll be the greatest set of all time, the most exciting set into the future. Um, alt arts certainly could be more. I think that another positive of alt arts is that there's a lot because of the difference in variety. I think that it would get less, it could get, and you'd probably agree with this, Gumper, and that's probably part of your point. It it isn't. I don't think it's ridiculous at all to argue that they would be able to last longer and be interesting to people longer because of the variety of the art and the differences and the fact that they're not all. It doesn't hit you the same way every time, like a Hidden Fates did with all of the something like that. I could see that, and them doing it. They could do it for years and just do different Pokemon and people being excited. Oh, now my favorite Pokemon. We'll see. We'll see. My dream is to be on Swami Shadow Garjaction for saying Captain Planet is my favorite hero. I think it's okay and even important to say some art is better than others. I think it's important to do it with kindness, though, and of course, not for the purpose of convincing someone to stop enjoying. Yeah, I just like it's just like are we art critics here? And even like art critics are so full of crap. Like, as I've said on some other days, like, my dad's like an art collector and my dad has like really strong opinions about what he likes and what he doesn't like. And then you talk to another art collector and they have really strong different opinion. Like, I don't know. I'm very suspect, but this is, I remember in like one of my like early philosophy courses, there was this conversation about, is all art subjective? Is all music subjective? Should we listen to experts? Anyone who's taken philosophy courses, it's a philosophy major or minor, will have had those discussions about who defines what is good art, what is good music, what is quality. Is it a democratic process of us all sharing opinions and then finding some sort of commonality, or is it like we listen to experts and experts tell us, or again, these debates will go on forever and ever. It's interesting. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure it's going to there's ever going to be sort of a conclusion. These are 1,000-year-old human arguments and conversations. Collect what you hate so you don't feel bad when you need to send it to Z&G. Oh my god. I like this point. Both things keep the other fun and interesting. I've been thinking about this lately. I wouldn't collect modern if I didn't love vintage, and I wouldn't collect vintage if I didn't like modern. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. I think one thing that happens, right, is like there's so much stuff to potentially collect that it's totally understandable for people to be like, there's just too much. And right now, alt arts are my favorite, or right now, this era or this thing is my favorite. And so I'm going to focus in on that because it's just too much money and too overwhelming. And it's not satisfying to collect everything. And that is like totally understandable. And I think sometimes that gets misconstrued as like, I definitely like this the best. I think people often just kind of like, they collect something, they're having fun. They also think this other thing is cool, but they're not currently collecting it. They're having a lot of fun collecting this thing. Why jump into that thing? I had a really nice conversation with someone at this show, at this card show yesterday about, he was like, I think this Star Wars stuff is really cool, but I'm just like, I like a lot of Pokemon stuff too, and everything is so expensive, and like, what should I do, and et cetera. And obviously I don't know, exactly this person's current financial situation and everything, but I said something like, listen, I think as long as you're enjoying yourself, don't stress out about, try not to stress out about what you're missing, right? Or about, oh, learn what's out there, figure out what you think's cool, what you enjoy, and then, slowly make progress on that. I get that easier said than done when there's like a million cool things, and then one suggestion I had is like, try to kind of figure out, okay, maybe if you are interested in starting Star Wars, or for Marvel people out there, it's like, maybe start a personal collection of one character, an affordable personal collection. I'm going to pick one character. I think this character is really cool. Or if you're coming from another hobby into Pokemon, a great way to start similarly, and I talk with sports card people a lot, and this is what I say to them. I know this is like mostly a Pokemon audience, so I'm saying the opposite, but I say, start with 1-2 Pokemon that you think are cool, or you can go the set route as well. But I think in some sense, it's even better to start with a specific Pokemon, because then you get to like collect across the eras and figure out which eras you think are really cool. And in the process, you kind of learn about all the different eras. And I think that really helps you engage in like the whole hobby in a lot of ways, but do it in a much more affordable, like realistic way. So you kind of get the knowledge and engagement in all of the different eras, but you don't have like the price point of trying to create master sets of everything. And I think you can do the same thing in Star Wars and Marvel and One Piece and Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever you decide to do. There, Magic, there's so much cool. Well, Magic, not so much. It's not really based around. Never mind. That's the one that doesn't work for that. But anything that has sort of specific characters. I think that's a cool way to collect, and it's something that I would suggest if you're getting kind of overwhelmed to think about maybe trying. As for the alt art, are you going for raw or graded collections? So far, I don't have any graded alt arts. I have, some raw ones that I've gotten from collection purchases. I haven't bought any like raw, like alt arts, just one at a time type of thing, but I've gotten some in, collections that I've bought. Definitely have sold some. I have a couple of the cheaper ones in, the $15 to $25 ones, like things like the Celebi, like that's like $25 to $30 right now. Like, I'm not rushing to sell that. I just think that card's great. I don't need that $25 to $30. I'm not panicking, to get out of that card quickly. I must, there's so much I could do with that $25 to $30 in this hobby. I would much rather have that money. I don't have to deal with any of that stuff on a card like that. So there are some cards that I've kept. As far as like completing, I am still have a couple rainbow rares missing. I think I need to go back through and make sure, but I still think I have a couple of rainbow rares missing. So it was only like 5-6 years after, the start of that I'm still working on complete. So for me, like the part of the fun of having so much enjoyable things to collect is like, I'm patient. I wait for price points that make sense to me, time periods that make sense to me, to do it. So in the long run, I will probably do both a complete graded set and a complete raw set in the very, very long run, but at least I'll do a raw set. I'm definitely more interested in doing a raw set. I almost always start with a raw set because it's much cheaper and I really enjoy the cards, and it's fun to build a binder. I really enjoy building binders, and then I have this cool binder that I can look through of the cards. It can be a little tricky. The money making part of my brain can be a little tricky to do that sometimes, because I will often grade the cards, and because then I can make more money and then I can sell them. So sometimes I end up completing both things around the same time, or even the graded stuff first. Um, but that's generally my process. And then sort of like over time, I will probably grade a lot of it myself. But it all depends on price point. Like there are sets, there are vintage sets that I'm still finishing, like working to fill out right now. That it's much cheaper to buy the nine than it is to like try to grade a raw card. So I will all day. I'm happy to buy nines and tens when I'm getting them at I'm definitely going to get this 9 or 10, and it's about the same price as like a raw card or something. We're not at that point for alt arts for sure, from what I can see. So I would definitely go raw, focus on raw, but at any point that can shift. So I'm going to go for another 10 to 15 minutes, guys, and then I'm going to call it a night. Let's see. Got some nice got some usuals in the chat here going back and forth. A couple questions here. Poke cards. Jake, I've heard you talk about first appearance cards. Do you find value in the first mechanics / art styles, for example, first EXs, first full arts, first gold stars? I do. I think that creates some collectability. Again, it's is that going to be the most important key fact? It's the further you go down the line, it's like, well, this is the first ever full art. This is the first ever shiny. This is the first ever. It's like, well, full arts are extremely important, then that may matter a lot more. If shinies are extremely important, then that may be really important. If this Pokemon is really popular and important, and now we have hundreds of this card, do I think the first appearance is going to stand out? Do I think the first full art, the first shiny of that card, and Pokemon's still really popular? Yeah, I do. I think there'll be specific markets. Again, the more cards there are, the more eras. We're still really early in Pokemon, hopefully. And the more cards and the more eras, the more this stuff will naturally, like, I'm talking about it now, but this stuff will naturally be obvious to people. We are not at a point where this is naturally obvious. I think at this point, the hobby is not naturally super overvalue. Like, I think as a collector, you're not like, oh my God, this is the first appearance. Like, holy, I think it's more of a sort of a mild thing. But I think there could become a point, particularly if those items become more and more scarce, where it becomes like, what, like, oh, that's the first one, where people naturally have that reaction. And that's where you're really going to see that value. Like, that reaction happens with like rookie cards in sports, or first, appearances of key characters in comics. And I think it takes time and a market to establish itself for that to happen. Rookies are a lot more natural in sports because every year there's sort of a new rookie class. It's crucial for the value, and the card company writes rookie on the card, and rookie, and really the card companies in and of itself, I think, probably tried to promote that because they realized that would, maybe it happened naturally, and then they kind of jumped on the bandwagon. I shouldn't say that it started from them, but I think that they realized at some point, right, that this was an important thing, or created it to be an important thing, so that there be constant value in each new year, in each new set, because there's going to be new rookies every year. In Pokemon, it's not going to work that way. There's not going to be new Pokemon every year. So there's not going to be that sort of incentive from the Pokemon company to create that type of thing. Although you will see, certainly with like the rookie legendaries, they tend to get a special card. It's interesting in sort of the first set of Scarlet and Violet that they chose Arcanine and Gyarados. I think that's kind of interesting. But in the past, oftentimes there will be sort of a special cards of kind of some of the new legendaries, the new mythicals, the new kind of probably most popular, potential most popular Pokemon going forward from that era, and I think that those will stand out from the rest. But over a long, but it won't become obvious and natural for people to feel that way for a long time, I think. Pokenomics. What do you think about the confusion behind categorizing alt arts? Like, are alt arts only the secret, um, like Moonbreon, or do they include SARs, airs, etc.? Well, this I don't know. Honestly, I'm not. I don't know. Is that conversation going on, L Dubs? Like, what exactly? What it? What does it? Does it have to be a certain thing to be an alt art? Um, I'm not super familiar with that conversation. Um, I think that'll be a conversation, though, as things go and as they introduce new cards in this era, like, are these alt arts? Are they not alt arts? Um, that conversation will kind of naturally happen over time. But there's also, what we talked about before, like, is it a democratic process of us all talking, or some of the experts or the people at the largest channels or the largest influencers going to be the ones that kind of like define that and set that? It's some of both for sure. That's the camp I'm in. Is it's some of both, and it's sort of we're in an ecosystem. Some of us have much larger voices than other people. Some of us are trendsetters, but at the end of the day, it is certainly, like, uh, a group, a large, many, many tens of thousands, 100,000 people kind of having that conversation until something kind of sticks in the long run. And usually the thing that sticks makes some sense. I am a believer that the longer something exists or continues, the more likely that thing has more kind of like inherent, makes sense, has some rationality to it. Like, it's difficult for things to stay irrational, for an extremely long time. And what I mean by irrational is like based, that's not the way to put it. I should put it, there are inherent things about it, there are fundamentals about the thing that make that people react a certain way to it over and over again, no matter what other people say. A great example is going to be like chocolate. It's like, well, you could tell people like chocolate sucks and chocolate's terrible. And maybe eventually you'd like convince people and people would have like a more of a negative reaction. But like, there's also like a chemical reaction. It would be very difficult to convince, so, um, things have sort of qualities about them yeah, that no matter what influencers say, it makes it, they have a sort of pull towards that reality, towards that sort of intrinsic reality of the object, and people's relationship to said object. Serialized isn't healthy to me. If there's a one of one and it gets pulled right off the bat, the health of the product can go really unstable, and people may end up stop caring for the set. Certainly possible. I think managing, right? It's not just about having a one of one or just one of one. There might be many one of ones for each different card in the set, or you know, one of tens and one of 20s and one of 100, so that there's plenty of chase still to be had, even if the number one, but will it impact the price of the product, and would the product go down? Sure. you know that can happen and does happen, at times, in sports. Certainly a good point, and something that Pokemon would have to. And I don't, I am definitely not clamoring for serialized cards in Pokemon. Do I think it would be fun and cool? Sure. Do I think we need it in order for this to be fun and enjoyable? Absolutely not. So, um, How do you feel about the MSRP of booster boxes? English 161, we're shopping at 45, whereas English has always sold for less. How do you feel? I'm not sure my tired brain is following this completely. Okay, where? Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying. So English tends to sell for less than the MSRP, whereas Japanese on the secondary market, whereas Japanese tends to sell for more. How do I feel about that? It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know thoughts really. I don't have any really strong thoughts. Interesting. I have to think about it. Sort of why they do that, what MSRP really means, right? At the end of the day, the suggested retail price. I don't really know about the theory of suggested retail price that well. Like I would have to read about like why, like how they come up with MSRPs, why they have MSRPs, why they suggest that, what's the psychology behind that. I don't really know. I should look into that. That's interesting. I've never been, I've never had to really think about that because I'm not a like an LGS, for example. Um, is the Pocket Change podcast coming back? Unfortunately, not. Although I did talk. So Keelan and I do still stay in touch. We talked recently, which was nice. And Wolf too is a great guy. I haven't talked to Wolf in a bit. Be nice to talk to him as well. Lovely guy. I like that with Rainy. Yeah, I did too. Trust me. I really enjoyed it. That would be something if they both wanted to do it, I would do it. I would make the time for sure. My goal is to get Jake to smile. I always fail. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna jump to the end and to see what people are saying. I'm a little bit behind, and then we're gonna close it down for tonight. I am going to be going live, I think Tuesday night with Sean from Reserved Investments again. We talked like it was still pretty mania-ish time. It'll be interesting to talk now. I'm going to pick his brain on, for those who don't know, Reserved Investments, go check it out. I enjoy talking to Sean. I very much appreciate him taking the time to come on and hang out. Should be a fun conversation. So be here for that on Tuesday. There have been a number of people in the Patreon and the Discord who have been asking for me to set that one up again. So I did, and I enjoy talking to Sean. Maybe I'll get to play the bull. I get to finally be the bullish one. I like being the bullish one sometimes. Okay, a couple more questions here that people are asking at the end that I will take. Let's see. What boxes do you have behind you? I feel like I see DBZ. Yep, there are DBZ, Pokemon, some Star Wars, some MetaZoo, some Flesh and Blood, some Simpsons, Looney Tunes, Power Rangers, Harry Potter, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, you name it, it's back there. and I have some sports back there and a bunch of other things too. Some Marvel. Are you waiting for alt arts to hit a certain price before you buy, or what's your buy signal? No, there's no certain price. I think again, one thing I talked about in the beginning, I do want to see what happens when like the next chase card comes in. I want to see where it's at. Generally like 2 to 3 years after. In the past has been a good time. I'm really looking for the hype, the attention to move on to something else. But part of what we talked about tonight, it may not. And so if this does stay hot, if it continues to stay engaged and prices are as high as ever and they continue to go up, like eventually I will buy. I'm not against paying high prices for expensive, as long as I can afford it. Um, it's more of the moment and the psychology and sort of the irrationality that I think exists and sort of and it and a lot of it isn't even irrationality. People are just collecting and are willing to pay more because they want something now. And I'm very patient and I just sort of I can wait. Um, I prefer to be that way, I guess. I don't think there's anything wrong with buying stuff, even if it goes down or you think it might go down because you like it and you want it now and you can afford it. I would never have an issue with that. In fact, I think it's like cool, like that you like something. Like when people are passionate about stuff and they really like it and they don't think that much about the money, I think that's cool as long as they can afford it. It's not cool watching someone buy stuff that they like probably shouldn't buy because they should probably be buying like food. Like that doesn't feel good to watch. Like, and trust me, as a vendor, like you get that vibe once in a while. It's like, dude, like I know you want these things, but like this is cardboard. Like I'm getting a vibe, but you can't. It's like you can only do so much. I have this channel to try to help. I'm not gonna to people's faces be like, hey man, like maybe don't buy this, So, hey Jake, what modern product most recently has genuinely excited you as a collector? I mean, most recently, what's excited me? Really excited me. I'm not sure anything like has really excited me. I like a lot of the products. I like the cards. I'm gonna buy, probably the Gyarados and the Arcanine in the next, few months. I think that hopefully because the print run, they're pretty easy to pull, and the print run will be very large of that. They'll be quite affordable. I liked the gold cards a lot. Those I thought were really cool. I was certainly excited by that set. Cool specialty set. I think the pull rates make that set really fun to open. I get, I'm not sure I was excited, like really excited, but I really like it. I know I'm kind of mincing words, semantics, but for products like Celebrations, Ultra Premium Collection, where the price either remains stagnant or increases slightly, how do you determine when to sell, when you need to / when exiting the hobby? Yeah, I don't know, man. I want to be careful with that because I don't want people to like, make mistakes based on, or what I say, but I feel badly about that. But for myself, I sell when I just think that it's too expensive. I mean, it sounds so stupid, but it's like I don't see the value in this. I don't really understand why people are paying this much. I think there's a ton of the product. Like these would be thoughts that I might not saying that I feel that way necessarily about Celebrations, but if I'm feeling that way about something that I own, I'm very happy and I think and I'm very happy with the price it's going for. I'm happy to sell it. I'm not looking to, you don't have to sell at the very peak. I mean, to be completely honest, like, I'm selling and making money on things, right? Like all the time, like at all these shows, like, we go and we make $1,000 in profit, in a few hours. Like, so I'm not stressing over, I need to make that extra $200 on this one booster box or the 300 or 400 on this product, right? It's not, there's a lot like, of, you just, to, I guess, use a little bit more like the flipper for a second, you just sort of keep it moving. I hear people say that in the flipper community here and in the sports car community, but there's truth to that. There's so many great plays, as people say, that there's no reason to stress about maximizing every single one and making all the money you can out of every single thing. If something makes sense to you, you should do it. If the margin's really good, you should do it. You should sell it, and you should, move on to the next thing. I do think that some items are very rare and you might really enjoy as a collector as well. And those are items that I'm more prone to hold because they're very difficult to get back. Any item that's very easy to get back, if I if I feel like it's too expensive or I feel very comfortable with it, I will sell it right away. Um, and then I have more money to buy something else and then sell that for a profit at some point, or collect it and keep it, if I choose. So, um, that's how I think of when, that's what I think of with this type of question. Shake, Black Labels, sell or hold? Anything could be a sell or a hold depending on price point. So I don't, I generally speaking, when a lot like the big Black Labels that I see sell and like lots of people talking about it, I almost always have the reaction, to be completely honest, to like, that's a lot of money. That seems a little crazy. But like there are times when I see Black Labels sell for like more reasonable premiums. I think some of the Black Label negativity could be overblown. Obviously, like I don't know what Beckett's, Beckett like had that, I'm not sure exactly what, where Beckett is in the market and where they will be, and will they manage their company well, and will they stay relevant? I think there's risk there. I think there's more risk in that than PSA 10s, both in investing in sort of the Beckett company maintaining, but there's also risk in PSA. Like PSA, Beckett could retake, anything's possible. There's a time when Beckett 9.5s, like in sports, were selling for, more or the same as PSA 10s. So you just never know. What Power Rangers do you have back there? I'm not even sure what the sets are called offhand. There's some boxes. Let's see. They're over there. I can't freaking point to them. It's so annoying. Up there on the top. There we go. It's like I feel like an idiot when I'm like looking at myself and moving. I'm not sure what they're called. I bought some from like Hillside for fun. I thought they're cool. They're fun. I when I was very little, I was a Power Rangers fan. I must have been, like 3 to 5. And so I used to love coming home and watching that show. I think I was probably around that age. It was like around the time I was like learning to swim. I think that's because I remember I would go to swimming lessons and then I would like rush home to watch Power Rangers. So I always equate the two of them. My mom. Okay. I think I made it through most things. Hopefully, let's end it there. As always, appreciate all of you guys. If you could leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, I would really appreciate that. If you can support me on Patreon and join our Discord community and be a part of that. Dan and I, Catch 'em All Collectibles, who's my partner on the Patreon, really appreciate that. For all of you who are already doing that, it means a lot. I know I say it every single time, but it really does mean a lot, to both of us. And we don't take it for granted. We appreciate you. So thank you. And I'll see probably a bunch of you guys on Tuesday for what should be a good convo. Normally, I don't announce it beforehand because, who knows with schedules and how things, hopefully it'll actually happen. But for now, it's in the books, and hopefully I'll see you all Tuesday for that fun discussion with Sean. Otherwise, I definitely want to bring some more PokeTubers on and some different people, some new people, some people who maybe haven't been on the channel before. Really try to make more of an effort going, again, to bring you guys some new things, some new voices, do some more, also do some more you know, what are they called? Call-in shows, bring some of you guys on, etc. And just kind of keep making efforts to entertain and inform and build, and sustain kind of this smaller community and sort of the broader kind of people interested in cards. So again, thank you all, and I'll see a bunch of you guys Tuesday. All right, take care, everyone.